Well, welcome to the Institute of Managers and Leaders, Australia and New Zealand. Thank you very much for joining us for our Development Day, the second session of today's fantastic lineup of facilitators. I've got Grant beside me, ready and raring to go for the second session. And the title of his session today is Employee Engagement, Whose Problem Is It Anyway? Of course, those who joined us for session one heard a great facilitated session with Jackie Perkins earlier, and we got a huge response from that, amazing questions that we will share as part of our resources, and also some comments to the session was fantastic. Today's Development Day has been born off the back of listening to our professional members, as well as our corporate clients, who have told us that motivation and engagement is the key piece of the puzzle right now in workplaces, particularly after the last couple of years of COVID-19 and a work from home model, a hybrid model, and trying to get employees back into offices. How do we really drive that engagement and motivation? We've got Grant here to present this second session. Before I start, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the Institute. We're 81 years old this year. We're the largest professional membership organisation for managers and leaders in Australia and New Zealand. And we focus on outcomes for managers and leaders, both from a training context and also a professional development context. We have mentoring, coaching, leadership programs, professional workshops that both our members and non-members can tap into from time to time to continue that development as a professional manager and leader. So we're delighted that we've got such a great audience for today's Development Day. The team have told me we've got over 850 registrants for today's sessions, so it's fantastic to have you all on board. And obviously today's topic of motivation and engaging your team is obviously a really pertinent one, because we've got so much demand for joining today. In terms of, before I invite Grant up to speak, and we're going to do a quick chair change as he slides in and I slide out. What Grant's really going to focus on today is exploring the real drivers behind employee disengagement and disenfranchisement, if I can get that right. So really understanding it from the employee's perspective, and then what you can do as a manager and leader and as an employer to really drive employees to lean in to your organisation, your mission, your purpose, and your vision as an organisation. We're absolutely delighted to have Grant here. Grant facilitates a number of management and leadership programs for us. He's also a facilitator for our workshops, and he's very, very experienced in terms of what he does as a facilitator. So Grant, I'll get you on now, but before I do, I'll do a little bio and then bring you on. So Grant is well-respected, engaging and energetic facilitator and coach who believes the secret to an organisation's future lies in its ability to engage, empower and inspire its greatest asset, its people. He uses his significant experience as a senior leader and change agent to help clients create a leadership culture that drives business results by harnessing the power of its people. Grant, it's terrific to have you on board for today's Development Day. Thank you so much for giving up your time to be here, and I'll hand the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Okay, look, good morning, everyone. And look, thank you for that lovely introduction, Sam. Greatly appreciate it. And I hope everyone's sitting comfortably. And when Sam approached me to speak about this subject of, you know, whose problem is employee engagement anyway, it dawned on me that it depends on the filter that we look through, or the lens with which we look at this particular issue. And it changes, the subject changes depending on how you look at it. And I want to address that with you today and look at the various lenses through which we look at this issue of employee engagement to see exactly whose problem is it. And I think that this is a really, really timely subject for us to be talking about, because, you know, most of you have been working really, really hard for the last couple of years. We know what's been going on around the world, and I don't want to say that P word, but you know what I'm talking about, which means a lot of us have had to experience disruption. there's, we're working from home, working from work. We've had to transition between the two, sometimes working longer and harder than we've had to in the past, simply because the job requires that. And a lot of people in the audience here, I'm sure, would be feeling kind of burnt out by that. And it raises a lot of obvious questions about the issue of engagement, why it's important, and who's really responsible for making sure that we're engaged at work. If you've been keeping up with the news from around the world of business, you'll know that particularly in the US, they're experiencing a high degree of people exiting organizations, and they call it the Great Resignation. And as recently as late January, I was reading that experts are worried that this sort of thing is going to land on Australia's doorsteps sometime in March. So I guess seeing as we're in March, now is probably a really good time to be talking about this subject. So before we get into that, I'm a huge fan of talking about little facts and what have you, and trivia that is related to the subject. So to keep everything upbeat, I'm going to talk about the Titanic. And you're probably wondering, why do you want to talk about the Titanic? Because most people understand, what the Titanic story is all about. It's actually next month, it's 110 years ago since the Titanic went down. And most people know that the captain of the Titanic was under enormous pressure to get his ship across the Atlantic on its first voyage quicker than any other ship, break all sorts of records, because that was going to be good for business, and because he was under pressure from his bosses to do so. But there's a couple of facts that you may not know, and one of those facts is that there were two guys up in the crow's nest that evening, and their job was to keep a lookout for icebergs, because they're racing at top speed across the Atlantic at night. They know that there are icebergs around, they've seen the warnings, and the guys up in the crow's nest didn't have any binoculars with which to see what was coming. The binoculars were downstairs locked in the purser's safe, because he was worried that someone might steal them. So here's two guys who are responsible for this massive ship, the biggest ship at the time, roaring across the ocean through all of these icebergs, and they're looking just in front of the ship to see what's happening. And of course, they saw the iceberg a little too late, and we know what happened then. There's another fact that you may not be aware of, and that is that there was also a fire in the coal bunker down in the ship where they store all the coal for the engines, and that fire had been burning since before the ship left port on his journey. So there's a couple of critical factors here that contribute to this issue, because some experts believe that fire in the coal bunkers contributed to the loss of the ship as well. So when we fast forward now to 2022, that's right, yeah, I've got to get my maths right. What's the world look like for us? So we're coming out of the back end of this pandemic, and we know that businesses need to try and catch up with where they were before, and we're struggling to get back into business. So of course the captains of industry are pouring on the coal and trying to roar across the Atlantic and get business back to where it needs to be. But there are a couple of issues, and that is that we don't know exactly, some of the issues that we're facing now are issues we've never faced before. Somewhere on the horizon, out there in the dark somewhere, is this iceberg, which we'll call the Great Resignation. The people up in the crow's nest can't really see that far ahead to see what's going on. They're just like, we're worried about it, it's out there somewhere. And down in the coal bunkers, there's a smouldering fires of discontent, because a lot of you people have been working so hard for so long, you're kind of getting worn out and tired. So I think there's a lot of similarities, and if you draw an analogy between those two. The thing is, it doesn't have to end in a disaster. And in fact, when I look at the issue of employee engagement, I think we have to cast our gaze a little bit further than what we've been doing up to date, and not look at employee engagement as something that we need to worry about now, because there are warning signs out there that things aren't going to be going well, that employee engagement's going to drop, and that's bad for business. This is something we should be talking about all the time. It's just a massive part of any organization's success. So let's first of all get clear about what engagement is and what it is not. So engagement itself is not employee satisfaction or employee happiness. people can turn up to work and they can be happy. You can put as many pool tables as you like in the tea room, or you can have pizza on a Friday afternoon. And those sorts of things, yeah, they'll make your employees happy, but it won't make them more productive. It won't make them pull out all the stops when they need to pull out all the stops. And it's not employee satisfaction either, because employee satisfaction is really lowering the bar to the point where we're just considering, look, are our employees satisfied? Now, we can have completely disengaged workforce here and a highly engaged workforce here, but if we just got a satisfied workforce, it's somewhere in the middle there. It's not really where it should or could be. Instead, employee engagement is an emotional commitment that the employees have to achieve the objectives of the organisation. So that's a fairly simple explanation, and it sounds like everybody's got to be keen on where the organisation is going, and that's true. We've actually seen that during the pandemic. We saw that engagement levels actually went up, and this seems a bit unusual given everything that was going on. Why would engagement levels go up? People just had to rise to the challenge. People had to put in that extra effort. They had to learn how to work from home. They had to learn how to work remotely. I know that I had to completely pivot my business to do everything online instead of face-to-face. So people stepped up to the plate because they had to. What we also noticed during those 2 years is that whilst employee engagement was going up, employee health and well-being was going down. Now that's relevant. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on, because health and well-being and engagement are complementary and they are additive. That is, normally any efforts you put in to engage your workers will also lead to greater health and well-being, and anything you put into the health and well-being of your workers will increase their engagement as well. So for the first time, we've seen this divesting of engagement and health and well-being. And we have to understand now that because that health and well-being has started to go down with people working so hard and struggling over the last couple of years, that now we're starting to see engagement drop off again. So what I want to do today is I'm going to put a couple of questions up on the screen. I'm going to take a bit of a poll here. The first one's coming up for you now, just to get a bit of an idea from you about where you fit into the organisation. We give you about 15 seconds just to answer those polls. Are you the head of your organisation? So you're responsible for the strategic direction of the organisation? Are you a people leader, someone who at any level of the organisation has direct reports? Or are you an individual contributor with no direct reports? So I'll just get you to answer that poll now. Give you a few seconds. Okay, if you see me looking down, I'm not filling out my lunch order. I'm just making a note of the results. Okay, so that's awesome. So we've got about 7% heads of organisation, 63% as leaders with direct reports, and 30% as individual contributors. Awesome. So now the second thing I'd like to know from you is what generation you fit into in the workforce. So we've just got to pop the second poll up here right now. We're getting all the exam questions out of the way really, really quickly. And the second one is, are you a millennial? If you're a young millennial or a Gen Z, you were born between 89 and 2001. Older millennials between 80 and 88. Gen X's between 65 and 79. And then my playground, the baby boomers, 1946 to 1964. Okay. So when we have a look at this, we've got about 13% of the people here today in that age bracket of being Gen Z or the young millennials, 28% being Gen X's, 42%, older millennials, 42% as Gen X's, and 16%, way to represent, folks. That's my generation, the baby boomers. That's okay, I'm only just a baby boomer. Lovely, thank you. And this will be important because we're going to look at in a moment how generations impact what people want from an organisation, because what people want from an organisation also goes to how we engage them. So the last quiz, the last poll is just to figure out where you see the responsibility as lying for engagement. So do you believe that it lies with the top tier of the organisation? Do you think it lies with leaders at all levels? Or does it rest with individual employees? Or is it everybody's responsibility? And the numbers are coming in and I'm liking what I see. Okay, lovely. So 1% believe it's the top tier of the organisation, 8% with leaders at all levels, 0 with individual leaders, individuals only, but 91%, that is awesome, believe that it's everyone's responsibility. Well, that's great, because this is going to be an easy sell, because the secret to engagement is that it is everybody's problem, it's everybody's responsibility. And I don't like talking about things in terms of problems. I'm very much a solutions-focused person, which is why I want to go through today how each of the various levels within the organisation, those at the top tier of the organisation, what they can do to actually increase engagement levels within the organisation. What can leaders do? And this is leaders at any level within the organisation. It doesn't matter if you're leading, several teams of hundreds of people, or if you're leading one team of half a dozen people. You all have something to play in bringing engagement into the workplace. And for individual employees as well. And for this one, in fact, individual employees could include people who don't have any direct reports. But what I share with you at the end of the presentation about what individuals can do to build a more engaging workplace, we can apply that to everyone at every level in the organisation. So look, thank you so much for responding to those really, really quickly. I'm glad to see that so many people see that this is everybody's responsibility. So I guess the rest of my job is going to be easy. I just kind of have to share with you how I think we can achieve that. Okay, so first of all, why is employee engagement so important? Well, we know that when employees are engaged, they will do the work that needs to be done. They'll put in that discretionary effort because they choose to. That's why it's called discretionary effort. They don't have to be forced to do it. We can motivate employees. That's great. But motivation only works so far, and it's better off if we have that motivation coming from within rather than being imposed on people from without. So when you have highly engaged employees, they just do a better job. They'll provide higher service to your customers, and that in turn will lead to greater customer satisfaction. If our customers are satisfied, we're going to get more repeat or referral business, which means sales are going to go up. When sales go up, it means higher profits for the organisation. Higher profits means the shareholders realise a great return. So it makes sense then that if the organisation wants to achieve what it is there to achieve, which is largely for those organisations that are for profit, we're there to provide a meaningful return for the shareholders. What's really important though is how we achieve that. So to win in the marketplace, first of all, you have to win in the workplace, which puts the focus clearly on the way in which organisations work to engage our workforce. I'm going to start with generational differences, because at the top level of an organisation, this is where the big decisions are made about the culture of the organisation and how we're going to take it forward. So we need to look at the drivers of motivation engagement based on the generations. So if you happen to be a young millennial or a Gen Z, which means you're born between 89 or 2011, and with the young millennials, it's 13% of you. Young millennials and Gen Z want an organisation who cares about their well-being. Now, if you remember what I said before about engagement going up because we had to respond to the pandemic, but at the same time, people are getting burnt out, so health and well-being was going down. You see why it's particularly important that we make a note that people want to have an organisation that cares about them, cares about their well-being. In second place, young millennials and Gen Z want an organisation that exhibits ethical leadership, which means doing the right thing rather than just putting profits ahead of doing the right thing. And the third priority for them was around diversity and inclusion in all its forms. This is not to say that financial stability of the organisation or open and transparent leadership isn't important. It just clearly shows where their highest priorities are. If we wind the clock back to the older millennials, those born between 80 and 88, again, this generation cares about organisations who care about their well-being. They also, in second place, say we want organisations that make ethical decisions. So, you know, the way we do things, the way we treat the environment, the way we treat our people is more important than profit. But interestingly, they also value open and transparent leadership over diversity, inclusion, and financial stability. It doesn't mean that those things aren't important. It just means that in the scheme of things, their top three priorities are slightly different, but they share the first two priorities in common with young millennials and Gen Z. When we go to the Gen X's, which is 42% of those of you here, the highest priority is ethical leadership, which is interesting. Want organisations who make ethical decisions. Our second priority is about caring for the well-being of our people. And the third priority is the financial stability of the organisation. So if you consider that 42% of the people here are in that generation, and if you consider that, you know, it'd be interesting to see at what level of leadership each of these generations are represented. You can see that there's a little bit of a difference here in what the priorities are for each of the generations. And it doesn't mean for Gen X's that diversity, inclusion, and open and transparent leadership aren't important. It's just that they're not in the top three. And incidentally, the baby boomers, those of my generation, match the Gen X's in terms of what they want. Ethical leadership ahead of caring about our well-being, ahead of financial stability of the organisation. Again, diversity and inclusion and open and transparent leadership aren't unimportant. It's just that they're not in the top three. So what does this tell us? As time goes on, more and more of my generation, okay, the baby boomers are going to be retiring and moving out of the workforce. More and more of the Gen X's are going to be moving up into those senior leadership positions, and more young and old millennials and Gen Ys are going to be coming into the workforce and starting to move through the workforce. So we need to be cognizant of what the makeup of our workforce is and what each of those generations actually need. Thinking for the future, unlike those poor guys up in the crow's nest who don't have binoculars to see quite so far, we need to build organisations that cater for the generations that are coming through. So the organisations need to care about the well-being of their people. They need to demonstrate ethical leadership, diversity and inclusion in practice, not just in words, and open and transparent leadership, not just making decisions behind closed doors and people don't know how those decisions have been made. So going forward, from an organisational perspective, we can't change the tide. The tides of change are always occurring. So as the generations move through the workforce, we have to start preparing our businesses for the now and for the future, which means we need to challenge any paradigms around outdated thinking about the role of employees in an organisation's success. We have to strive to break down barriers that create an us and them kind of dynamic where, you know, there's the leaders, then there's the rest. We've got to break these paradigms down. And we need to embrace these generational differences because those coming through the workforce and aging up through the workforce, they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow. So we have to start creating the workplaces today that engage the people that we have now, and those people in senior leadership have to understand that we have to cater for the needs of the people coming through. We can't hold back the tide as King Canute tried to do because the tides of change are always moving in ever relentlessly. So we need to think about how are we creating an organisation that is going to be here to meet the needs of our employees now and into the future. So that's the first lens that I want to have a look through. The second lens is for leaders, and this is leaders at all levels within an organisation, whether you lead a big team or whether you lead a small team. Employee engagement is not an action, rather it's a product of creating the environment that allows people to bring their best to work each and every day. So some of you may know of Abraham Maslow. He created Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you don't mind me paraphrasing his quote, and for the obvious reasons, I think of the self-actualizing person not as an ordinary person with something added, but as an ordinary person with nothing taken away. The average person is a human, a full human being with dampened and inhibited powers and capabilities. Interestingly, when we think about what do we need to do to motivate and engage our people, we think about what we need to add to the workplace or add to their experience. Instead, I think maybe we need to look at what our organizations, what our culture, what the environment takes away from people. So if we assume that people want to do the best work that they can do, in what way are we actually taking away from that? And so my perspective on this is that instead of trying to put into people what nature has left out, just try your hardest to get out of them the very best of what nature has left in. This means creating a workplace environment that recognises and respects the whole person, someone with untapped potential just waiting to be realised. And so that is the approach that I've tried to bring to leadership for many, many years, and the approach that I advocate when leaders start to talk about, look, how do we engage our people? We need to create the right kind of environment that allows people to bring their best, rather than just think about how do we push people to be motivated and more engaged. So if we were to, take a leaf from Maslow's hierarchy of needs and think about engagement as being a 4-story building, and on the first floor of that building is safety and security. If we get people's safety and security needs met, then we can go upstairs to the second floor, and the second floor is belonging and connection. If we can satisfy people's needs for belonging and connection, we go to the third floor, which is self-esteem and self-expression. And if we can satisfy those needs for our people, we can go to the top floor, which is becoming the most that one can be. Now, not everybody is interested in getting to that first floor, but the thing is, the people that take the organisation into the future, those future leaders that are coming through, that talent that you want to harness, they're the ones that really want to get to that top floor. So I think it's worth, as leaders, looking at what we can do at each of those floors to meet the needs of our employees, to create an environment in which engagement is something that occurs as an outcome, not just something we strive to achieve as just an action. What this means for leaders. Okay, on the first floor, safety and security, it's about physical safety. People want to come to work and go home with all their digits and all their limbs. They want to be physically safe. Psychologically safe means that we need to call out things like bullying and harassment in the workplace. I know when I look around with the work that I do, I see in a lot of organisations, it's something that's a little bit of an insidious problem that's not always dealt with. Because remember, the standard you walk past is the standard you set. So just make sure that we make it as psychologically a safe environment as possible. Get rid of bullying and harassment. Third one is job security. If people are in fear of their jobs, that triggers a fear response in people, a fight or flight response, which doesn't lead to a positive outcome in terms of performance. So insofar as we can do this, we need people to feel safe and secure in their jobs and not constantly feeling that they're on tenterhooks. And the fourth one is the health and well-being needs to be supported in practical means, not just in words. This means not having unreasonable demands about workloads or work hours, and really focusing on how we can take care of the health and well-being of our people. Now, if you as a leader, you're going through this now and you're ticking off these boxes, and I suggest you do that. Any that you can't tick a positive one, that's an action item for the future. But if you tick all of these, congratulations, let's go to the stairs and we'll go up to the second level. So belonging and connection means breaking down the silos between groups of people. Most of you will be familiar with the idea of silo mentality, with this team doesn't talk to this team, doesn't talk to this team, or this department doesn't talk to this department. Everyone's focused on their own goals. We need to break those down and allow people to build stronger connections and stronger relationships across the various groups within an organization and even between people within the one team. We need to promote respect for and acceptance of individual differences. Now, one thing that here at IML we do really, really well is we've got a number of programs that utilize DISC behavioral profiling that help people to develop their emotional intelligence as leaders. And we have our IML 360, which we can use to help people develop the skills and attributes they need to be an intentional leader. So investing in people in that regard is a great way of helping to develop that belonging and connection, because people just get each other. People aren't just difficult, they're just different, and we need to embrace that. And we need to encourage team approaches to problem solving. This means, if as a leader you're really good at problem solving and making decisions, then coach your people through how to do that and how to do that together. When a team approaches problems together, it builds stronger connections, greater unity, greater collaboration, and all these things go straight to the bottom line of building an engaging workforce. If you can tick a box for all of those, let's go to the stairs and go up to the next level. And this is the floor of self-esteem and self-expression. This means promoting behaviours that enhance mutual respect. Most organisations will have above and below the line behaviours, which we talk about quite often, but the below the line behaviours aren't always called out. We need to make sure that we, as leaders, are the best possible role model that we can be for the kinds of behaviours that are above the line. Basic human respect, respecting differences between people, respecting other people's input. Secondly, make your people feel as if they make a difference, because guess what? They do. This means empowering your people to be able to make decisions that are appropriate for them, and developing them and giving them all the right tools they need to do the job, and trusting that they can do the job. If we can tick that one off, show them that you value them, not just as an employee, but as a fellow human being. I think we need to bring a lot more humanity back into the workplace, and thinking of your people as the people around us in the workplace, whether they be colleagues, direct reports, or leaders, as just like us in so many ways. I think that can break down a lot of barriers that can drive people apart, and that can lead to disengagement if we allow that to occur. If we tick that box, let's go to the fourth floor. And this means to help people become the best that they can be, give them opportunities to learn and grow. Every leader should be developing their ability to coach their people. It's one of those aspects of leadership you just cannot walk away from. We need to be able to coach our people to constantly work at getting better and better at who they are. We need to invest in their ability to become masters of their job. Give them the tools, give them the training that helps them step up to the plate and bring their very best game each and every day. Third one is involve them in decisions that affect them as much as possible. We know that people require a certain level of autonomy in order to feel that they have some control over their world. If we don't involve people in decisions that affect them, we take that away. Remember what I said, it's sometimes not about giving people something to become engaged, it's just not taking something away. So involve people in decisions that affect them as much as possible. And the last one is foster a clear sense of purpose. When people are aligned to a clear sense of purpose and they know the value that them doing their job brings, whether it be to the business or whether it be to the customers, we need to make sure that people have this clear sense of purpose. And we can see from the information that I've already shared with you about the generations, a sense of purpose is not necessarily about putting profit into the pockets of the business. It's about having that clear sense of purpose that we're doing some meaningful kind of work and that we can do so in such a way that values us as whole and complete human beings. So that's what leaders can bring to the engagement story. Now, the third lens with which I want to look through to see this issue of engagement is that of our employees. Everybody has something to bring to the workplace. In fact, we know that culture needs to be driven from the top down. We need to have the right kind of expectations set from the top of the organisation throughout all levels of leadership, so that everyone turning up to work has something to which they can align. But everybody in an organisation is responsible for the culture. That means that every single person that turns up to work is accountable for what they bring to work each and every day, because every little part contributes to create that culture. Some people get to the point where they think, you know what, I'm just not getting what I want from work. I think I might look elsewhere and see what's happening over there at that other organisation. The thing is, the grass is not always greener on the other side. The grass is greenest when you water it. And I think this is an important thing to understand, because from my perspective, I've never been comfortable with being a passenger and expecting other people to do things for me. And that's why I'm so glad that 91% of you said that it's everybody's responsibility, because we all bring something to this story of employee engagement. So what does this mean? There are a few questions that I put together you can ask of yourself, same as I've done for the leaders before. And that is, in order to take the most accountability for your own level of satisfaction, look at what you bring each and every day. Because you folks are right, it's everybody's responsibility. It's not just the organisation's responsibility to make you feel motivated and engaged. It's not just your bosses. Everybody contributes to that. So how do we do that? Number one, there's some questions here for self-reflection. Firstly, do I know what's expected of me? If you don't know what's required of you to do your job, then simply ask. Waiting to be told what you're supposed to be doing is just waiting for someone to tell you where to fish. So if you don't know what's expected of you, ask. Secondly, do you have the right tools for your job, and have you sought them out? Sometimes, the right tools might be new software, it might be you need some training or something like that. If you need tools that you don't have, then ask for them. But what I would stipulate is make sure that you can show the benefit to the organisation of getting those particular tools or that particular training. In other words, you just got to sell the idea. Thirdly, am I genuinely committed to doing quality work? Now, when you look in the mirror each and every day before you come to work, are you able to convince yourself that you are committed to quality work, or perhaps just turning up and watching the clock and hoping that Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock gets here as quick as possible? If you can tick that off, yes, I'm committed to quality work. We'll go to question number 4. Do I advocate for my ideas and for the ideas of my colleagues? So many people have so many brilliant ideas that rarely see the light of day. And there's an old saying that says, don't hide your lantern under a bushel, which means if you have great ideas, speak up, share those ideas, and champion your colleagues when they have ideas as well. The more we support each other and we share our great ideas, the easier it is for organisations to continue to grow, and the more engaged we become, because we are contributing to the organisation. We have a greater sense of autonomy. The 5th question is, do I demonstrate an active interest in my ongoing development? Now, your ongoing development doesn't mean always working at getting a promotion. It can be for some, but there are probably many people here that are just happy doing what they're doing for the time being, but just want to get really good at that, maybe learn some new skills, add some new skills to their quiver of arrows. Demonstrating an active interest in ongoing development means being an active player in those performance conversations that you have and the professional development conversations that you have with your boss. Number 6, do I seek specific feedback on my performance and development? Feedback is one of those subjects that I often find when I look at organisations, they do feedback when they really, really need to, maybe once or twice a year. Some organisations do it really, really well, and they use feedback as something that we just do each and every day for success. Rather than just wait for feedback, go out there and ask for feedback. But more than that, ask for specific feedback to help you learn and grow. It's these conversations that we have with our managers that actually help us to become an active participant in our own development, and all of these things will go to the bottom line of our own engagement. Number 7, do I actively work to build stronger relationships with others? When we look around the workplace, sometimes we can be forgiven for thinking that certain people are difficult. They're not difficult, they're just different to us. And if we look at the ways in which we can relate more effectively with people, we can practice something as simple as positive intent. And positive intent is one of those simple things that you can do, which is, someone obviously meant well in that email or the way they posed that question to me. It just didn't come across that way. When we practice things like positive intent and basic human respect, we can actually start to build stronger relationships with the people around us. And every single success in life, whether it's business or personal, comes down to your ability to build these strong, effective, mutually beneficial relationships. Number 8, do I avoid and discourage gossip, put downs, and negativity? That's an absolute big one. When I look at organisations that sometimes struggle to motivate and engage their people, I can often see this one here in the background. And I've been in a situation in the past where there's been gossip in an organisation of which I was a part, and the best way that I could deal with that was to make sure that my team knew how not to buy into that. Something just as simple as, when someone approaches you and they want to gossip about someone else, well, I don't think I can really help you with that. Have you spoken to the person in question? Just don't get involved in gossip and what have you. And the question number 9, do I treat colleagues with respect, value their ideas, their contribution, and their individuality? When you look at it, we have more in common than we have in difference. Yet sometimes we tend to focus on the differences between people, and we tend to focus so narrowly on that it gets in the way of us being able to work effectively together. And number 10, simple question, are you bringing your best game to work each and every day? If you go through these list of 10 self-reflection questions and you start ticking off the ones that you think, yeah, I'm pretty good at that, you may find that there's 1 or 2 that you haven't thought about that potentially you can focus some attention on. Because we know that when we become aware of areas in which we could contribute more but aren't, that's where the learning and growth really, really happens. And so I'm glad that 91% of you can see that it's everyone's challenge, employee engagement. Because if we have an organisation from the top down understands and values these generational differences and is committed to providing the workforce what it needs based on what matters to them, ethical decision making, concern for health and well-being, then organisations start to shape themselves and their culture that makes it easier for people to become engaged and want to put in their discretionary effort for the organisation. If leaders are focusing on the environment that they create, they spend less time putting out bushfires or dealing with problems. They just focus on creating the environment in which people can step into and bring their very, very best. And if each of us at an individual level can ask those reflective questions, and you could be a frontline worker, you could be a leader, you could be a CEO, doesn't matter, you can ask yourself those questions. If everybody's looking at what they can do to bring something to the environment that creates a culture that's positive, that's uplifting, that's engaging, we don't have to worry quite so much about motivation and engagement initiatives, because remember, it's not an action, it's an outcome of just doing the things that we should have been doing right all along. So, final note to you, and this is an area in which you can take immediate action is, and this is for everyone, look around you and see those things that you can control, okay? Fix the things you can control. Largely, these things are in ourselves. So first of all, we can look at what we bring to work each and every day. If we're a leader, we can fix the approach that we take to creating the kind of environment. We can't fix the environment though. Everybody has to play their part in that, but at least we can start changing that. Influence the things you can't fix. Now, you may have issues in the workplace where let's take gossip, for example. It's a good one. Okay, apologies there. Seemed to be a little small fire in the engine room. We've got it all under control now. Okay, so influence the things that you can't fix. So if there's gossip on in the workplace, you may not be able to fix that, turn the switch and turn it off, but you play your part in making sure that people are solutions focused, not problems focused, that you're doing your bit to become the best role model that you can possibly be to create that environment where people can just thrive in the workplace. And lastly, understand that there are those things that you cannot fix, you just need to accept. And I can't get my slide to go to that next one, but trust me, it's there. Because when we look at our engagement levels in the workplace, sometimes it's easier to think the grass is greener somewhere else. It's not. It's greener where you water it. And everybody in the organisation has a role that they can play in helping the organisation become one that everybody can be proud of, one in which everybody can bring their best game to work each and every day. So that's why I advocate, no matter where you are in an organisation or where you are in your career, fix what you can fix, influence what you can't fix, and accept the things that you can't do anything about. And if we all do that, we create a better world for everybody. So look, thank you everyone. I'm just going to throw across to Sam now. Sam's got a couple of points he wants to make before we open up to the questions. So we'll welcome Sam to the lectern.
Thank you very much, Grant. Terrific presentation. I hope everyone's action plan is absolutely full. Those questions that you finished on then, particularly around self-reflection, I felt were so valuable, not just for managers and leaders, but actually every person in an organisation to ask those questions. So thank you so much for delivering such a terrific presentation. Now, we have had a couple of technical issues, but I think we're back online and I think everything's working well. And we can see the question box, which is the most important thing right now, because we've got an opportunity to ask Grant some questions from his presentation, and anything that came across you as he was talking, please share those in the question box now, and we'll have a chance to answer those questions with Grant. Just quickly before we get there, I do know that, as I pointed out in the first session, we do have a great follow-on from the development day that we host is our workshops. They're 2 by 90-minute virtual workshops. Facilitators like Grant and like Jackie earlier host those workshops, no more than 20 people in them. So it's a really tight-knit group. It allows you to network, to integrate your learning, and to work with the facilitator to get the most out of the sessions. So the workshops are a fantastic opportunity. Please go online and have a look, or email us at info@managersandleaders.com.au, or in New Zealand, info@managersandleaders.co.nz. So please email us, get in touch, and we're very happy to share those upcoming workshops with you. I'll also highlight as well, whilst we're at it, that we've got an Essentials program that's starting on the 15th of March, and Grant himself will be facilitating that Essentials program. So looking forward to that. We've also got Foundations coming up in a virtual context on the 26th of April. So once again, if you are interested in any of our workshops that I talked about earlier, or our leadership programs coming up, please get in touch with the team at the email addresses you can see on that left-hand side. So let's cut, Grant, straight to some Q&A. There's a lot of feedback here, fantastic, a lot to take away. Gossip, here we go. How do you encourage your team to not participate in gossip without them feeling, A, that you are trying to suppress knowledge transfer, and B, that they are that they need to undertake this gossip away from you and essentially hiding under the iceberg?
Yeah, I like that. Really, the iceberg. You hide it under the iceberg. Good place to hide it, because it's a lot deeper under the water than it is above. Look, that's a really great question, Jason. I think it is. Thank you for that. Gossip is something that is disruptive and destructive in any workplace environment. And I think that when we see gossip exist, it's usually because there's nothing better to take its place. There's nothing better to talk about. So look, yes, sometimes there are people who just feel the need to gossip and what have you. And I've certainly had that experience in the past. And although I was not able to deal with that individual, the best thing I could do for my team is to set my expectations of them around the way in which they behave in the workplace. And this is why I said to them, look, if you get into this situation where you're the object of this gossip, just say, hey, look, I don't know if I can help you with that, but perhaps you need to go and talk to the person you're having this issue with. And I found that seemed to work really, really well, because we're setting this expectation. We want a better workplace. Most people want a better workplace, and they see things like gossip and negativity as the sea anchor that holds it back. As long as they get a safe way to, cut that rope and move on from it, it tends to be quite effective. The other thing to think about is that when you're trying to, the knowledge transfer and gossip are not the same thing. Gossip is when people have nothing better to do and they can't see positive, so they have to speak negative. And we need to create the environment in which we call that thing out. People need to call it out. And I think it's an example of, we can spend time running around putting out bushfires, and gossip is and negativity is one of those subjects that is kind of the bushfire. And if we spend our time running around putting out the bushfires, it takes our focus away from the things that we need to do to prevent those bushfires from coming up. So what I found is that rather than look at every single issue as it's occurring and address those issues and put out those bushfires before they get into conflagrations, what we need to do is to take the focus away from that and start creating the environment in which people actually get something better and something more worthwhile. If we focus on building the environment in which people can bring their best, they have no need to be involved in gossip. The other thing I do with teams is tell them that complaints never go down, complaints never go sideways, complaints only ever go up. If someone's got an issue, then they need to talk to the person they've got that issue with, or they need to pass it on up the line.
Excellent answer, Grant. And that actually leads to the next question, which there's a couple here in a similar vein, which revolve around speaking up to leaders. So here's one of those questions that I think nails it. How do I approach my leader when they are not responsive to my feedback?
Okay, and not feeling psychologically safe to provide honest feedback. Okay, yeah. This is where we can't drive the process from the bottom up. Everybody has a role to play in creating an engaging workforce. And so when we get to the situation where we're not able to pass that feedback in a vertical direction, that's something that it can be really, really difficult for people to have to deal with. Now, all that we can do is to bring our very best and positive approach to that. And if we approach feedback in a way that we're giving someone a gift to help them get better and better at what they do, it's just, we're not charging them for it. It's free help, if you like. Now, this is one of those situations where you may not be able to fix the fact that your boss doesn't take feedback well, but it is an area that you may be able to influence to improve the situation. If you can't influence someone, then find someone who influences them and influence that person. That will generally help to create an environment in which you can get that message through to others. If we can't fix something or we can't improve something through influence, then there are some things we just have to find a way of accepting it and living with it. If it gets to the point we can't accept it, we can't live with it, we ask ourselves, why am I here? What's the reason why I'm still here? But if everybody puts their effort into fixing what they can control, influencing what they can't, and accepting the things that, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, we can focus on those things that actually bring the most value to us and to the organisation. So I know that that's a tough one to have to deal with. I'd love to say, if you could influence it, get all the leaders on a leadership training course, and we can certainly help them to develop their emotional intelligence, to develop their understanding of different personality styles through DISC. I mean, that's what we do. And it would be nice to think that we could have that impact at every level of the organisation all the way down. But from where people are sitting looking up, sometimes it's hardest road. If you can't fix it, try to improve it by influence.
Right, just extending off that, and something that popped into my head is a great way to communicate that with managers and leaders is demonstrating the practical outcome that it's having for you. So in terms of the difficulties you're having, in your role, or the difficulties customers are facing in the business because of that particular issue. Is that a good way to communicate?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, if for example, I gave the example there of asking feedback on yourself, and if you're in a situation where like you can't really pass feedback forward, you can at least be the role model for taking feedback. So go and ask your manager for feedback, specific feedback. And it's got to be specific, not just look, how good do you think I am or bad at this. So I'm looking to improve in this particular area, aspect of my work. I'd like some feedback around X, Y, Z. What can you share with me? Then we become the role model, but in a reverse direction. And that's an example of what I was talking about with that influencing in an upwards direction. Because if we can be the role model for how to respond to feedback in those situations, then what we do is, we're influencing that vertical direction. It might just be enough for the boss to go, you know what, feedback's not all that bad. They're actually taking it really well and they're growing. Maybe that's an area of development for me.
Thank you, Grant. Very well said. Here's a very specific question. I think a phrase I hear often is that what stops people adding value and bringing their best is, oh, we've tried that and it didn't work. How would you respond to that phrase?
Yeah, that's a good one. That comes up all the time, and it's when we look at disagreement in the workplace, and people are, we tried that once, that just didn't work. Let's not do that again. It's a natural enough response, particularly if people have been with an organisation for a long time and they've seen initiatives come and go. They go, well, I can tell you now, that's not going to work. So again, without sort of trying to tackle the issue head on and put out the bushfire of disagreement, we have to look at ways that we can approach these situations in a slightly different way that changes the way that people respond. In a situation where people say, oh, look, well, that won't work. We tried it once, it didn't work. Then my response would be, well, look, hypothetically speaking, if this was the only option that was available to us, what would need to change in order for this to work? What would need to happen in order for this to be a viable solution? Now, people don't always have the answer to that. It could be they're right, it will never work. But the thing is, unless we start shifting people's mindset away from a problems focus and towards a solutions focus, we're never going to move beyond that point. It's true. 5 years ago when you tried it, it may not have worked. But the thing is, it could have been the wrong time for that particular solution. It may not have been well implemented. It may have lacked sufficient resources. There's any number of reasons. So the simple response is to shift thinking from problem focus to solutions focus. If that was the only option, what would need to happen in order for it to work?
Excellent answer, Grant. I think we've run out of time now. There are a lot of questions we haven't answered, so I apologise for that, but we'll pass them on to Grant. Perhaps we try and get in touch. But thank you so much to everyone. As I said, we've had a terrific response to today's development day. Thank you so much for all the questions, the commentary, the work and the polls that you did in today's session with Grant. We've got another session, our third session, coming up in 1 hour with Shannon Cooper, and that will be on the workplace of the future and looking at hybrid workplaces and how we can create them to boost productivity and drive employee retention. I think it's a terrific topic to follow what Grant's presentation has been, which has been absolutely outstanding in terms of the takeaways, and I hope all of you have got those action plans full. In terms of the resources from today's presentation, we will circulate those this afternoon to all participants, so you'll each receive the resources that Grant has talked about throughout his presentation. And look, thank you so much again for your involvement. We love outcomes. We're outcomes focused as an institute, and we want to see you get great outcomes from these sessions to take and implement back into your workplace to make you a more effective contributor, manager, and leader. So thank you very much for joining today. We'll see you all in an hour.